Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery Podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison, and normally at this time, I would introduce co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy is actually going to be off microphone today, behind the scenes, if you will. So we hope Tracy is doing well. There will be no banter at the beginning of the show. As a result, I could just, ramble on a monologue, but I think it's better to get right to our guest this week. Really looking forward to this, because joining us on the Ghostly Gallery podcast this week is the man who gives us the character of Dr. Gangrene, a staple on Middle Tennessee television, and that is Larry Underwood. Larry, known as the Physician of Fright, has been hosting horror films since 1999, bringing us shows like Chiller Cinema, Creature Feature, and Dr. Gangrene's Sanitarium. That's the current name of the show. You can watch The Good Doctor every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Nashville's NECAT Arts Channel. That's NECAT, NECAT Arts Channel. And that can be accessed through the channel's app on Roku. Several of the episodes since the first time we had Larry on, which was a few months ago. A member of the Horror Host Hall of Fame, Larry Underwood is also an accomplished writer, and he has just come out with a beautifully done new book. It is called Masters of Terrormonies, The History of TV Horror Movie Hosts in Nashville, Tennessee. And for those watching on YouTube, here is a copy of the book, beautiful cover art. We're going to spend most of our time discussing the book on tonight's program. By the way, the foreword to this book is done by our friend, horror historian Jeff Thompson. Jeff has been a guest several times on this show, lives down in the Tennessee area, is an avid fan of Larry's. Also, Mark Maddox, an accomplished horror artist whom I have met at Monster Bash down in Mars, PA. Mark Maddox did the cover art for this book, and as you can see, it is beautifully done. Larry, welcome to the show. Congratulations on the book. It really looks great. Well
Thanks
done.
so much, Bruce. Appreciate that. And thanks for picking up a copy.
Absolutely. I ordered a copy, and it just arrived the other day. A few chapters in, looking forward to reading it. It is a fast read, very entertaining, very informative. Larry, let's start with the title, Masters of Terrormonies. How did you come up with that rather creative moniker?
That came directly from Nashville horror host Sir Cecil Creep's show. His show, Creature Feature, in the 1970s. Sir Cecil Creep was my inspiration for starting my own television show. At the beginning of his show, there was a voice that voiced over the intro that gave a little monologue, and at the end he said, "And now your master of ceremonies, Sir Cecil Creep." And to make it doubly sweet, doubly I don't know what the word is, doubly good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That voice was Ken Bramming, who was the first horror host in Nashville. He's the person that actually did the voiceover for Sir Cecil's show. So appropriate. That's the word I'm looking for. So it was doubly appropriate that that Master of Terrormonies was the title for the book.
Well, it's a great title. It's quite catchy, and it's all about horror hosting in Nashville going back to the late 1950s. We're going to get into this real in depth. I remember, Larry, the first time that we had you on, and you mentioned you'd been working on this book for, I guess, off and on about 20 years. Tell us a little bit about that process you went through. Some people, churn out a book in a year, 2 years, and it can be very well done. I've actually written baseball books, and sometimes I've had to do it on that kind of a time frame. But this was a 2-decade process for you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and that's pretty much just not Well, let me back up. When I started my show in 1999, again, I started it as sort of a tribute to Sir Cecil Creep. Of course, my own character is nothing like Sir Cecil, but he was the inspiration to do this type of show. He was on the air from his original show from 1971 to 1973. When I started the show, I first started doing some little tributes online on my website. I would put little things about, there was nothing on the internet that I could find about Sir Cecil Creek. So I would put little tributes to him and Dr. Lucifer. I had those on my website. Those were the only hosts I knew of at the time. And I would get a lot of people that would comment online about it. I started doing research back then in the early 2000s. I work at a hospital. I work at the VA hospital in Nashville, which is located on Vanderbilt campus. And as part of my one of the benefits that we got back then was we got a Vanderbilt affiliate badge, which allowed me to use the Vanderbilt library. So I would go after hours. I would stay at work for an hour or two and go over to the library and use their microfilm and go through their microfiche machines and go through the microfilm and scroll through looking for any reference of Sir Cecil Creep. And of course, you couldn't. They weren't digitized. They weren't online. Nowadays, you can just go to newspapers.com, sign up for it, pay for a 6-month subscription to newspapers.com, and it's all right there online. Excuse me. But back then, it was all by hand. So I started doing that, and I started making some phone calls. And over the years, I would kind of do it, come back to it. I would find pieces and parts and do a little research, talk to people, and then get busy with life. My show, I had 3 kids at the time, all the things. So it was a thing that I would kind of visit and come back to. And I really wish that I had gotten on the ball about 5 years sooner, because really over the last 5 years, 6 years, a lot of people passed away that I had either talked to once on the phone or had meant to talk to, who I would like to have caught up with. And that's as much for the companion documentary that we're going to make, that we are in the process of making, as the book itself also, as well.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the process that writers, authors often go through, these starts and the stops. You're not making money on the book as you're researching it and writing it unless you're very fortunate and get a $50,000 advance. That doesn't happen all that often. It's never happened for me. Unless you're a best-selling author, that's not the kind of thing that usually happens. You have a full-time job. You have a family, as you mentioned. So it's not always continuous. Was it frustrating, though, with the starts and the stops in writing this?
No, I was always really focused on my show. So it was kind of just something I was doing, you know, in,
Yeah.
in my spare time. But it was always in the back of my mind and always something that I wanted to get to eventually. And glad that I finally carved out the time to do it.
Yeah. Now, the city of Nashville is best known, of course, as the home to country music. I've never been there. I hear it's a beautiful city. You have a major, tourist audience that comes to town. It's also a city that has been trying to get a Major League Baseball team, and of course, me being a huge baseball fan the way that I am, that's interesting also. But this is a city that has really been a hotbed of horror dating back to at least the 1950s. And I think now that people have this book and can read it, they'll really get a sense that, yeah, this is part of Nashville's culture.
Yeah, it's kind of a little known thing that there were that many. Wasn't even aware when I started doing the research. I uncovered some hosts that I wasn't aware of when I first started as well. So just seeing them all together in one place is pretty neat. And the interesting part about it is there was no overlap between any of the hosts. Every host started their show and ended before the next one. Sometimes there was just a year or two, or sometimes there was a little bit more, but there was never any overlap. That just found that really interesting.
Yeah. And obviously, there's demand for this in Nashville. Why else would these stations keep churning this out?
Yeah. Yeah, I think most cities have, you know, If you look, you can find the cool and spooky stuff.
Yeah.
It is interesting though that a city known for country music would have that much horror entertainment going on.
Absolutely. So the story of horror that you tell with this book, it begins with the first Nashville host, Dr. Lucifur, played by a man named Ken Bramming, who's a legend in your area. So this goes back 1957. And for those who might not be aware of the story, the Shock Theater package of horror movies was made available in 57 by Screen Gems. And they made these films, many of which had not been seen on TV since their original release back in the 1930s or even the early 40s. So they're now made available to syndicated TV stations across the country. It's a collection of 52 old horror films from Universal Studios, including many classics. As part of the deal, Screen Gems encouraged local TV stations to create costumed horror hosts who would introduce and discuss the films as part of late night showcases on Friday and Saturday nights. And many of the stations actually followed through and did this, including Nashville. So with that backdrop, if you would, Larry, tell us about Dr. Lucifur.
Yeah, Ken was working at the station at the time and got recruited to play the part. Dr. Lucifur is his own creation. He's not a vampire per se. He's a Transylvanian. He wears a tuxedo and tie. He spoke with this really deep voice. He's a station announcer, known for doing commercials on the channel, and they would do a lot of skits on the show, like Ernie Kovacs kind of very influenced thing. A lot of characters and skits. So it wasn't just Dr. Lucifur. You mentioned Jeff Thompson before. Jeff was personal friends with Ken, and they worked together on the radio later at a different station, and WAMB, which was an AM big band station. And they really got to know each other. And he told Jeff that, that Dr. Lucifer was wildly popular at the time, and that, his segments were always in black and white, regardless of if there was any color in the movie or anything. That always the Dr. Lucifer segments would be black and white, something he insisted on, which I think is kind of a neat touch. His original show was called Shock, named after the Shock package of films that you mentioned earlier, the Universal films. And he came back later with another show called The Mystic Circle, or he changed names to The Mystic Circle.
You mentioned his look. He's wearing a tuxedo. Really kind of a good-looking guy, very suave, debonair. He's got the eye patch, which I guess is a little bit intimidating. A Transylvanian gentleman, though not really a vampire, as you said. So he was a guy that, unlike some of the horror hosts who are meant to be hideous or intimidating, he doesn't really have that kind of look. It's very different.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love about that Universal package. The Universal, I call them the first wave of horror hosts, really exploded all across America. What I love about it is that there was a wild variance in characters and looks that people came up with. I mean, you name it, and they did it. You had, people like him that were sort of costume. You had witches and hunchbacks and weird vampires and other characters. I mean, you name it. It was a lot of imagination going on at the time.
Yeah. Ghouls were very common as well.
Yeah. Ghoulardi.
Yes, that's right. One thing we should mention, Larry, the way his name was spelled, Dr. Lucifur, was Lucifur, not Fer. And in a lot of the print materials, newspaper reporting of the time, maybe magazine articles, they had it spelled like you normally would spell Lucifer, Fer. but he intentionally spelled it differently, and I guess that was so that people would realize I'm not really affiliated with the devil here.
Yeah, that's what he told Jeff. I suspect that he came up with the idea that it was spelled differently later in life. I have nothing to exactly go by with that, but the fact that it was spelled Lucifer, ER, in all of the print for the early years leads me to think that it was later with one of the later incarnations of the show that he sort of hit upon the idea. Because, characters evolve as
Mhm.
the show goes along. I can attest to that. My characters look certainly evolved as I went through the years. So that's kind of a natural thing, and I it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Do you know if he got any blowback from people who didn't like the name? They thought, this is satanic in some way, even though it was obviously meant in good fun. Do you know if any of that went on at the time, late 50s, early 60s?
No, I don't think so at all. I
No.
think everyone just accepted it to their credit. It was not a problem.
Yeah. One of the things you point out in the chapter on Ken Bramming and his character, Dr. Lucifer, the very first show that they aired was the original Dracula from 1931. And that was one of the signature pieces in this Screen Gem Shock Theater package. But the advertisement in the newspaper that was placed, I guess, by the station, the TV station, didn't have a picture of Bela Lugosi from 1931. No, they had Son of Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr.'s picture. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. It's one of those things. They probably did whoever did it probably had no clue. These films were not seen. They had never been shown on TV. Probably whoever put it together had never seen the movie and,
Right.
just didn't know.
Yeah. I'm curious, Larry, is there any video at all left of Dr. Lucifer that you can find out there?
There are 2, snippets because they were shot on film. So this was the days of live television. So, all of his stuff was done live except the intro and outro. They shot those on film, and so those survive. But there's no kinescopes of any of his shows. I wish something would pop up, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's all we have. He left a scrapbook, to Jeff. He, gave that to him when he passed away, and also the tapes of, the recorded footage of Dr. Lucifer. That's
Yeah.
how it got passed along.
Were you able to use Jeff's scrapbook in research?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was very gracious with sharing that.
You mentioned both in this interview, but also in the book that Jeff Thompson did know Ken Bramming. He worked with him at a radio station in later years. You never had a chance to meet him?
No, I did not. I wish I had. By the time I started my show, I just never got around to meeting him, or I had never had before, I started. I would have been great to, ha
Yeah.
have that discussion with him, but no, unfortunately
I'm
not.
curious, Larry, I know you make a lot of public appearances in the Nashville area. Some of your shows are done with a studio audience. Do some of the old timers out there come up to you and say, "Hey, I saw Dr. Lucifer. I got a story for you." Does that ever happen?
It has not. I would love
Really?
it would. I've seen a few folks on Facebook when he's mentioned say, "Oh, I used to watch Shock Theater all the time." I've never had anybody come up and in person mention Dr. Lucifer. I would love that. Of
Yeah.
course, I've had, plenty of Sir Cecil Creep, mentions over the years, but not Dr. Lucifer.
So Dr. Lucifer is the pioneer of this story, starting in 1957 with the Screen Gems release of Shock Theater. And next up on the Nashville Horror Host roster is a character you just mentioned, Sir Cecil Creep, played by an actor and television personality named Russ McCown. So I've seen some photos of Sir Cecil, including some of the great photos in your book, never before seen in some cases. And in costume, he was not very attractive.
True. He was a hunchback, had the really funky teeth, had prosthetic, fake teeth in, and makeup, scar on the head, wore a hunch on his back. purple tunic that kind of resembled chainmail, had a chainmail kind of look on it. It was an interesting character. Wore tights, black tights. Um, he had a cape that had a big purple collar, red in lining inside and dark blue outside. So again, one of these characters that's not just a cookie cutter stereotype. Is very unique um, uh, image that he came up with.
I assume that there's not a lot of video of him either, even though he's a little more recent than
Yeah.
Dr. Lucifer. Was his style very different from what Ken Braming did?
Yes, very much so. His stuff was very tongue in cheek. He spoke with a much slower delivery. It was both of them were comedy shows, horror shows, but they were both comedic. But yeah, very different in tone. And he had a really great set. Of all the hosts, he probably had the best set of any of them. It was permanently installed at Channel 4, WSMV. It was there. The news was on one side of the room. His set was on the other. That's how popular he was. Done big stone walls and a doorway he would enter through every time. Just really great set.
Yeah. Was it like from a castle, a laboratory?
Yeah, it looked like an underground, like it was in the intro it says deep below the studios of WSMV. So supposedly he lived and lurked under the studio.
Right. Now that's really interesting that he had a full-time set, because I imagine a lot of these local hosts, they were operating on very low budgets. They were probably using temporary sets that maybe were just arranged for that once a week or twice a week if they did both Friday and Saturdays. So it's interesting that his station really invested in this.
They did, really for both of his shows. His first show, it's interesting. Both, as popular as he was, both shows were only on for 2 years. They had a 2-year run, each of them. Creature Feature, 71 to 73, and then the Phantom of the Opry he came back with as the Phantom of the Opry in the early 80s. And both of them were a 2-year run. He was an employee at both stations at the time that he was on the air. So that's sort of how that happened. Film editor. So,
Yeah. So interesting. After about a decade, he comes back as a new character.
same character, different name of the show. Still Sir Cecil Creep, but instead of Creature Feature, since he changed stations, the show was now called The Phantom of the Opry, which made sense because his new show was on TNN, which was owned by Gaylord, which is Opryland. And opening credits show him opening the doors of the Grand Ole Opry, walking down the aisles, hobbling down, and then going down a ladder to the tunnels below the Grand Ole Opry, which is where he was supposedly was lurking this time.
Yeah.
Below the Grand Ole Opry.
As I remember, Larry, the first time I talked to you, you didn't really have much of a chance to see Sir Cecil Creep live on TV because you were still very young at the time. But he's been an influence to you, even more so than Dr. Lucifer. You kind of pay homage to him, right?
Yeah. He was my hero as far as the show goes. I was aware of him. I met him one time at a scouting event, and that's the patch that I have on my lab coat was a patch that I got in Cub Scouts. And I met him at that, I say met, surrounded by, 100 other kids, met him as handed me my patch.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I saw him live one time. But yeah, I always remembered it. And the interesting thing about his second show, that Phantom of the Opry show, is it was nationally broadcast. So
Really?
that's another reason for his lasting fame. He was probably the second host nationally to be broadcast across the country after Elvira. She beat him to it by 1 year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea about that. Let's go back to meeting him. You said it was with the Boy Scouts?
Cub Scouts.
Cub
Yeah.
Scouts.
Cub scouting. And that's what that patch was made um, that patch was made to give to scouts. That's how popular he was at the time. Every scout guy who met, would do one of these events would get a patch, and they still surface online from time to time. It's kind of interesting. I mentioned that I'm doing a companion documentary. Things still pop up all the time. This is so ironic, but there's a girl that comes to all my live shows. She drives all the way down from Kentucky. She comes to every one of them, brings her little kid named Vinny. He's awesome. And she reached out to me just out of the blue and said, "You're not going to believe this, but my brother-in-law's dad is the guy who designed Sir Cecil Creep's scout patch." And I was like, "Wait, whoa, what?"
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just such a small world. And so I'm going to get together with him. Unfortunately, his dad passed away last year. So again, like I was saying, I wish I'd gotten started just a little bit sooner, but yeah.
So when you met Russ McCown, did you know that was going to happen ahead of time, or is that something they kind of surprised everybody with?
Oh yeah, I think we knew. I don't remember it so well, but yeah, no, it was like part of the event.
Well, it obviously stuck with you, and you still have the patch all these years later. That's great.
Yeah, after I'd done the show for a year or two, I was doing tributes to him and Dr. Lucifur on the show, and I remembered that my mom had taken all those scout patches and sewed them onto a blue jean jacket. And I was like, I still got that. I should put that on my coat.
Let me ask about him what I asked about Ken Bramming. Have fans who watched his show ever come up to you, talked about it at all? Because he's a little more recent.
Yeah. I've had a lot of folks mention Sir Cecil Creep. I think the thing about Dr. Lucifur is that those folks are a lot older, so they don't come out to funky live shows that are happening at 9:00 at night or whatever. Whereas folks my age are the ones that watched Sir Cecil Creep. More of them, it's getting to be less and less all the time. More of them will drag themselves out to some late night event.
Yeah. So Sir Cecil is still fondly remembered.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
So there have been some other hosts that you detail in the book as well. In 1977, a man named, and I believe it's Bob McGee, if I'm not mistaken, he gives us a new character appearing on Channel 5 in Nashville, and his character is called the Count of Five. Tell us about him.
Yeah, there was your first true vampire on the airwaves in Nashville, the Count of Five. Bob was great. There's just a little bit of footage, unfortunately for him, that exists. But yeah, he wore the tuxedo. He said that when they started the show, he didn't have a tuxedo, but the station went and bought a second-hand one somewhere that over the years got pretty threadbare. And so he didn't even have it anymore. But he wore a cape. He got some fangs made, some teeth, a partial that he could put in. That I did an interview with him. He's still around for the documentary, and he said, "Yeah, the teeth don't fit like they used to, after 40 years or whatever." And
right,
very good-looking guy, handsome guy. The women loved him. His show, he told me Sir Cecil Creep was his idol. He said, "I wish I had the kind of set that Sir Cecil did, but he pretty much shot." The corner of a studio, or he didn't have sets. It's just one of those things. They just made do as wherever they could, and not a whole lot of a budget. And the show ran its course until he told me finally the last show was one where there was some kid that had cancer and was dying, and he said, after the show, he went to his station manager and said, or maybe even before they did. Maybe they didn't. That was the movie they were going to do. And he said, I can't work with this. He said, I think it's time we bury the Count.
Really? He lasted for 6 years, 1977 to 1983. It was called Movies and Madness.
Yeah, it had another name at one time. I'm drawing a blank, but yes, that was the name at one point. I think that's the main name that he went
Yeah.
by.
Also Suspense Theater, I think.
There you go. Suspense Theater
Yeah.
was, I think, the first name. Yeah, and it never even really had a set time. It would kind of bounce around depending on what time the movie of the week ended that ran before
Mhm.
him. So,
Yeah.
his show kind of, so it was, and it wasn't listed under Movies and Madness or Suspense Theater. So it was really hard to track the exact start and stop dates. And Bob didn't remember either for his
Right.
show. So I just did the best I could with, you know, looking through newspapers to track it down.
With these horror hosts, you don't often hear about them having a strong female following. I guess he was one of the exceptions.
Oh yeah, good looking guy. I think he did. I saw several. He showed me several pictures where you can just see the women checking, kind of giving him that look.
Yeah. Some other hosts, Larry, that you talk about in the book, they've included radio personalities, Phil Valentine and a guy named Coyote McLeod. Tell us about their TV personas.
Yeah, both of those guys. I didn't know about it at first. I learned about Coyote along the way. I called him one time. He's passed away now too. I called him on the air well, not on the air, but at the station, and talked to him for a few minutes about it. But yeah, he got to do it. His show was really odd. So he he got a co-host named Rhonda Jones, who is still with us also. I tracked her down and got to talk to her and got some great footage from her too. But the two of them, she was an Elvira. Well, okay, let me back up. His show was him hosting Elvira hosting a movie. So they would shoot, and then at some point very early on, they decided they needed a co-host. So they had at a bar a lookalike contest, an Elvira lookalike contest. Rhonda won it, and so then they brought her on to be the co-host. So it was Rhonda and Coyote hosting Elvira's movie. So they would shoot host bits, beginning, middle, end, and wrap it around Elvira hosting movies. Really odd. I don't even know if Cassandra knows about that. I would love
Really?
to ask her about that.
So she was in California doing her thing, and they used recordings of that to mix in
Well,
with their show?
it was syndicated across the country. So that station had the rights to her movie. And
I
so
see.
they said, you know what, to her show, uh, um, and I think that they just said, you know what, let's what movie macabre, is that right? I think that's her show.
Yes, Movie
Elvira
Macabre, yeah.
Yeah. And so they decided, what would be great? We should have our own hosts hosting Elvira.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's what they did, which I was really excited to track her down. Later, after the Elvira show, she and Coyote had another show called Scary Tale Theater, which
Hmm.
was a proper horror host show of just the two of them. Again, as Coyote McLeod and Rhonda, but they actually had costumes this time.
Yeah.
He, had a little more makeup on and had the vampire tuxedo kind of look.
Yeah. Do you know Cassandra Peterson, by the way?
No, I've not had the
It doesn't
pleasure.
matter. All right.
Yeah.
How about this other radio personality, Phil Valentine? What was
And
his persona?
Yeah, Phil Valentine's really well known, nationally syndicated conservative talk show host,
Oh,
and he
okay.
he was broadcast all across the country. Very popular show amongst his listeners. I also talked to him at the station. I found out about his show. I interviewed him for Scary Monsters magazine. Him and Bob McGee both. I did interviews with both of them for Scary Monsters. Um, but yeah, Phil. It was just a very short-lived thing. He couldn't believe anybody even still remembered it. I had gotten an episode. Some listener sent me. I wish I knew who it was. Somebody sent me or gave me at a show a VHS recording of his show, um, Benedictine the Mad Monk, and I watched it and was like, "What is this?" And I was watching it, and then I saw a local commercial pop up, and I went, "Wait a minute, this is local. Hold on." And then I started watching closer. And I was like, "Oh, this is another host."
Yeah.
So it's one of those discoveries you make along the way. I was so thrilled to find out about it, and um, yeah, so that was an unexpected one.
One other host to touch upon before we talk more about you and your career, character named Humphrey the Hunchback, which I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, Barry McAllister. You know, what's funny is as when I started my show, he's the host that was on the air right before me, and I had never heard of Barry either, and wasn't familiar that he had even done that show. But again, there was no overlap. His show ended before mine began in '99, and it was funny because I hosted for a couple of years, and then I decided, you know what I would really like to do? One thing I would like to do is I would like to do a movies in the park kind of show
Hmm.
and have a movie. At the time, I owned a 16 millimeter print of The Phantom of the Opry. I wish I still had it, but I had it at the time. And I thought, you know, we could show that. It's public domain. I'm going to call the parks department and see if they will let me show this in the park and do something for kids and, you know, families, whatever. Well, when I called down there, the lady I talked to, Minnie Rogers, she said, "I work with a guy who did a show like yours. We should get y'all together." And I was okay. Who are you talking about? She told me about him, and next thing you know, Barry and I did this together. So this was
Hmm.
a joint venture that we did at the parks
Yeah.
department, and did it for I'd say 4 years straight. I
Oh,
think it was
really?
4. Yeah, at Halloween time. We showed Phantom of the Opry the first year with live organist playing.
Yeah. That's the silent film version?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
live painting. Mhm.
Was it hard getting a big screen for that, or?
No, they had a big giant one. I don't know. I guess they did I don't know if they did other movies or whatever, or maybe they
Yeah.
rented. Yeah, they had that and rented a projector and the whole thing, and it was cool.
Yeah. What a cast of characters. Humphrey the Hunchback, Dr. Lucifer, Sir Cecil Creep. It's really fun stuff. I love looking back at this era, and we still have it in different ways today, both locally and nationally. So, given all this research and all this interest you have in this subject, and you've had this interest for a long time, when did you start to think that maybe I could do something like this? I could be a horror host in my home state of Tennessee. When did that first pop up for you?
It started in the late '90s. I was working. I was running a comic book company with my partner Chuck Angel. He and I were partners on this venture, self-publishing comic books. We'd done it for about 5 years, writing, drawing, self-publishing, the whole thing. And I got married and moved up to Hendersonville, Tennessee. We had a new kid and we're merging families, and life was just way too busy. And I'm like, I don't have time to write and draw all these comic books anymore. So I let that go and sat on it, without doing anything for a year and a half. And I was feeling that creative urge coming back. It's like, I got to do something. What am I going to do? Well, I met a guy who lived, it doesn't anymore, but just 2 blocks up the road from me, who had a cable access TV show here in Hendersonville, Tennessee,
Mm.
and was talking with him about it. And he was telling me, I was asking him a lot of questions like, how does this work? What do you do? How often do you shoot? How long does it take you to put shows? All the stuff you ask. He said, you want to do this, don't you? I said, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know if he goes, no, I think you should. I think you'd be good at it. And
Yeah.
that was sort of that little kick in the tail. Flashback about 10, 15 years earlier than that, when the station first started in Nashville, they had put in the newspaper a call to anybody interested that you could come take classes and learn how to make TV. And I actually went to one of those. This would have been in the '80s. I didn't have really an idea for any kind of show I wanted to do at that time, and didn't really, didn't have my stuff together enough to even, but I was curious enough to go and hear what they had to say about it. So the idea of doing a show was in my mind back as early as the 1980s. But for the show that I wound up doing, 1999 was when I started.
Yeah. It must have been kind of daunting to think here you are, a medical professional, which can be a stressful job, and I'm sure there's a huge time commitment. And then you're thinking about doing this as well. Did that give you any pause?
And a full-time family.
Full-time family, yeah.
That
That's the
was
most important job.
Yeah, that was the hardest part, is being a dad with kids. Well, I'm not direct patient care. I'm more on the admin side of things. So
Okay.
that's easier. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV.
Right. Literally.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, I do get to use that line sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the biggest thing was juggling family life. That was work. I work at regular Monday through Friday hours, so weekends are open. So that wasn't the problem. The problem was juggling family life and squeezing in time to write and shoot and edit these shows and all that. So, and then when it started getting popular, it really became difficult. In about 2004, phone was ringing all the time. People calling me, want me to do this, do that.
Mhm.
I kind of almost at one point had to kind of take a step back, kind of put some checks in place. Like, let's step this back for a minute because we got responsibilities.
Yeah. Now you're on every Saturday night in the Nashville, Tennessee area. How many shows are new versus how many would be repeats of old shows in a
Well,
typical year?
yeah. So I've done 75 episodes of Sanitarium now, and right now I'm doing all reruns as I've been working on this documentary. But I really need to do some new shows this year. The new ones over the last couple of years have been the live shows.
Yeah. Do you tend to concentrate them more in the fall, like Halloween season, or is that not a factor?
No, that's not really a factor. As a matter of fact, Halloween's on a Saturday this year, and Cameron McCaslin, who is the program manager and my partner on the show now, he was really wanting me to do a show on Halloween night. But from day one, I've had a policy in place that that's my day off. I will
Yeah.
do Dr. Gangrene any other day of the year, but not Halloween.
Yeah.
And so I think it's smart. Also, there's so much competition on that night between trick or treat and parties and everything else going on, that who knows what the worst thing in the world would be if nobody showed up. You know what I'm saying? Have poor attendance because you're on Halloween night, and that's not what I want to do on Halloween night. I want to enjoy it.
How about the night before, Friday?
Yeah, that would
That's
be
a good
fine.
night.
Yeah, Friday night would be great. But again, that time of year, there's just a lot going on. I mean, haunted houses, and I just don't know that a Dr. Gangrene live show is what people would choose to do with their Halloween weekend when you've got so much going on. I'd rather push it back a month, do a November Thanksgiving special and show a Thanksgiving turkey and have fun with that than try to, compete with everything else. I mean, there's probably 100 things I could find to do on Halloween night. And I'm not even exaggerating.
Wow. So Larry, in coming up with your character of Dr. Gangrene, and you've got all these influences in the Nashville area, previous horror hosts, did you find yourself at any point borrowing from any of them, influenced by them? Or was this character, Dr. Gangrene, something you created out of whole cloth?
Yeah, no, not so much, because the only one I knew about was Sir Cecil. I didn't have any footage of him at the time.
Yeah.
There's back in 1999, you think about it, YouTube didn't exist yet. Streaming video didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
I put together a real rudimentary website, but I mean, it was just like a few buttons you click and read some info and show some pictures. So I started reaching out to people to get videotapes of old hosts, but when I started the show, I didn't have that yet. So no, it was just, what can I do? Well, I work at a hospital. So I started asking around, and some of the research doctors that were friends of mine said, yeah, I can donate some lab equipment. So I was getting beakers and flasks and things given to me. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be a mad scientist. It felt comfortable. It felt right when I put the lab coat on and goggles, So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
where
that's
I
cool.
went. And the name, I think I told this last time I was on here, but ER, the TV show, was really popular at the time. And
Sure.
I was getting stopped in the hospital by people and told, "You look like that character from ER." They were talking about Dr. Green, played by
Right.
Anthony Edwards,
Yes.
and I had a little more hair at the time. So, I looked he and I favored each other at that time.
Right.
So Dr. Green, Dr. Gangrene, it's kind of a play on words there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
This has really nothing to do with horror, but have you been watching this show, The Pit, about the hospital in the emergency room in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
No, I have not seen that.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max. Noah Wyle, who was one of the main characters on ER from the start, is the star of this, and I think he's like the executive producer. And I just started watching it recently. It's had 2 seasons. They just finished their 2nd season. It's really a fantastic show. It's very fast moving. It's a crazy situation. This very busy ER. They just go from one catastrophe to another. But it's really compelling. So maybe down the line somebody will come up with Dr. Pitt or something like that.
I'll have to check that out. I try to
Yeah,
do one streaming service at a time outside of Amazon. I couldn't keep Amazon, of course. But I
yeah,
tried to do so. I had Shudder for the longest time, and I just got rid of that. And I'm doing the Criterion channel at this moment, so I'm kind of really
okay,
enjoying digging into their stuff. But when I come
yeah,
back to HBO, last time was when I decided to binge watch The Sopranos again.
right.
Maybe I'll check it out.
Well, being someone who works in the profession, even if it's the administrative side, they have administrators in the show too, and you might like watching The Pit. I wanted to ask you one more question, Larry, about your persona on television. And one of the things I like about your show, and I've been watching a few shows since we first had you on several months ago, you're someone who doesn't change your accent for this role. You speak on the show just like you're speaking with us, just like I assume you speak in everyday conversations. And I really like that. I think it lends legitimacy. You've got, an honest to goodness Southern accent, and you don't change it at all for the show. I think that's great.
I appreciate that. When I first started the show, I was doing a little bit more of like this, talking Dr. Gangrene here with chiller cinema. And it
Yeah.
just, it, over time, it just evolved. Again, like I said, you grow as you go along into being myself. I think
Yeah.
Zachary kind of morphed into one person. I don't think there was much separation between John Zachary and Zachary, the horror host, by the time he was done. He was
Yeah.
just Zachary the whole time, and he was
Right.
great. He is the
Yeah.
best ever, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, I think in your case it just lends some authenticity because sometimes when people do voices for these characters, I mean, it's so campy, it's so over the top, it's so I don't want to say fake, but it is kind of contrived, and I think yours comes across a little bit more sincerely
Thank you.
as a
You have to
result.
be a really good actor to make that work, and I'm not a trained actor, so to hold to do a accent effectively and maintain it, because that's the thing. You just see some of them in the interviews, like with Scary Monsters. I mean, excuse me, with American Scary, the documentary. You'll see some of the hosts sometimes will start doing an accent, but then they sort of break during the interview. It's hard to maintain that. You got to be really good. Penny Dreadful is one that she does a good job keeping her character. Danielle Gilherter, she's great, but it's hard.
Well, the book is Masters of Terrormonies: History of Horror Movie Hosts in Nashville, Tennessee. Beautifully photographed, well written. It's a quick read from what I can tell through the first 2 chapters, and really an intriguing history about horror in Nashville, a city better known for country music, but should be known for its horror hosting and its popular horror culture. Larry, really appreciate the time. The book is available at Amazon.com. I mean, it's just fresh on the shelves right now. We hope it does really well for you. I think it's going to, but best of luck with it.
Thank you so much. And I just want to, before we go, just shout out again my folks that I worked with. Mark Maddox on this cover, which is absolutely beautiful. Jeff Wilson did the interior illustrations. He did these nice little cartoony illustrations of each host and inside. And of course, Jeff Thompson did my forward for me. So I appreciate all of those folks' assistance as well. And just the opportunity to put together this book about this quirky subculture of Nashville and maybe help people think of something other than country music, hot chicken, and the Tennessee Titans is great.
All right. Great job, Larry, and great job, everybody else that you mentioned helped you with the book. Our thanks to Larry Underwood, a.k.a. Dr. Gangrene. You can watch his show, The Sanitarium. It's every Saturday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, and it's on the NECAT channel. If you've got Roku, there is an app for it, pretty easy to find, and you can watch it every Saturday night. So we thank Larry Underwood for joining us. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to feature our next Monster Mailbag, a few emails to take care of. Stay with us on the Ghostly Gallery. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. Glad you're joining us today. We thank Larry Underwood for joining us to talk about his new book, Masters of Terrormonies. And we now move on to our second ever Monster Mailbag, a few emails to catch up with. So the first one comes to us from a past guest, and I have to admit it was prompted by the fact that I sent him a link to a recent program that Tracy and I did about the 2006 film Abominable. So I sent Matt McCoy, the star of that film, good guy, fine actor, sent him the link, told him that we reviewed the film. We had good things to say about it. So Matt sent me an email back, and he said, "Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate the kind words." I forwarded it to Ryan, and he's referring to the director of Abominable, Ryan Schifrin. Matt then writes, "Be well," and he signs his emails MM, Matt McCoy. So good to hear from Matt, who was on our show a couple of years ago. We talked about The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. We talked a little bit about Abominable, but good to hear from Matt McCoy about that film that he did back in 2006. Very good movie about Bigfoot. Our second email comes to us from a very recent guest. This is from Christopher Locke, who was just with us on a previous episode. So Chris writes, "Tracy and Bruce, a quick note to thank you both again for your continued interest and for last week's podcast. Heard it this morning. Great job as always. Looking forward to the video version." Chris goes on to say, "I'm presently working on The Mummy, the complete history of the 1932 horror classic. Hope to have it completed by year's end in time for its 95th anniversary. Stay safe, keep smiling, and go Tigers." Chris Locke. Chris is a diehard fan of the Detroit Tigers, so he knows about my interest in baseball. So we appreciate hearing from Chris. Incredible that he just moves from one book to another. And these are not 150 pagers. These are comprehensive books, 400, 500. He goes into every aspect of many of these films. His Wolfman book is currently available on Amazon and in some bookstores as well. And looks like next year we're going to have The Mummy coming out as far as his latest book. So thanks to Christopher for that email. And then our third and final note comes to us from someone that we didn't previously know. The name of the person is Lyndon. Lyndon writes, "Hi, Bruce and Tracy. Your latest episode had me totally hooked, especially your contrast between the raw emotional punch of Talk to Me and the classic monster suspense of Abominable. Hearing you both dissect what makes Possession Tale so chilling and the way you brought in the new Monster Mailbag segment to highlight listener questions on themes and patterns in horror storytelling inspired me to reach out. Lyndon then goes on to introduce us to a potential guest, and we're going to be following up with Lyndon about that. We hope to arrange that interview in the coming weeks. But thank you very much, Lyndon, for the very kind email and for the contact for a very possible future guest. So our thanks to Lyndon, Christopher Locke, Matt McCoy for their correspondence on this week's Monster Mailbag. We thank our guest, Dr. Gangrene, Larry Underwood. Pick up his new book. It's really good. Masters of Terrormonies, all about horror hosts in Nashville, Tennessee, a history going back to 1957. And of course, I thank my producer and co-host, Tracy Asteria, as well. We thank all of you for listening, for watching, for joining us in what we call this Museum of the Macabre. And we do hope we'll see you again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.